today. I hope you can hear me. Type 10 in the chat if you can hear what I'm saying. And let me know if you hear me clearly or if I need to adjust something. Good morning, good morning. Good morning, everyone. I hope it's not too early in Uganda. I tried my best to make sure that I'm live at a good time. Today, I just need to know if how I sound. Kaso kenkebere wano ku YouTube. Ndabe oba musobola okumpulira. Yeah, I thought so. Kaso kendabe wano kyensobola okukola. Hello, mumpulira. Hello. Check. Check. Atao. Let me check. So kendabe. Yeah, is that good? Alright, nasobola okwewulira. Alright, kale. Manyi kyengenda okukola? Kati kweno essaawa ndowooza ngenda teekako ne ku TikTok live. Ndabe oba nsobola oteekako ne ku TikTok live, tugende live ku YouTube ne ku TikTok. I'm live. Can I borrow your charger? The long one. Thank you. Esimu yange enaatera okufa, so for me to plug it in so that ne ku TikTok ngendeko. Thank you. Alright. Abantu abaku YouTube nenzizza nnyo okutuninga in ku Sekai Solomon Kampala is live on YouTube. So kendabe kyensobola okukola wano n'essimu yange. And tumala tugenda kulabira awo. Let me first fix some things here. Yes, leero tugenda kusoma ekitabo kye bayita Museveni's Uganda, Paradoxes of Power in a Hybrid Regime. Sorry. All right, everyone, welcome to my live. Give me 1 minute. Let me check something real quick. All right. Welcome everyone. Thank you for joining. Sorry. Live yange njitandise kumachanyo na ye. I appreciate every single one of you that is joining me today. We're starting a new book. I've been following us on Instagram. All of you know that we've been looking at some reading material and educating ourselves, just learning new things here and there. Maybe so too young, but to free our minds from all this propaganda that we've been fed ever since we were young. Chizibu, I haven't been able to add the picture of the book. Ekitabo kyenjagala okukozesa bakiyita Museveni's Uganda Paradoxes of Power in a Hybrid Regime. Thank you all for joining. So, kasooke male okuloginga in wano ku iPad yange gye ngenda okukozesa okusoma ekitabo, and leero tugenda kwe-educatinga. Ebbanga lyonna lyensobola okubawa ngenda libawa. Sorry nduddewo, especially abantu abali ku YouTube, masonyiwe, because nduddewo okutandika ebintu bye ngambye nti ngenda kola. Kikino ekitabo, kikino ekitabo, Museveni's Uganda Paradoxes of a Hybrid Regime. can just screenshot and maybe you look for it later. Chinumia knew that I can't put the picture on the screen. Chinumia, I can on YouTube. Avandabako YouTube, you guys can see. My voice is still low, Basonio. People on TikTok, are you guys hearing me all good? Or we're still missing? Because by the time I start, njagalanga audio yange li bulungi. It's clear? Thank you, Kale. What about YouTube? Let me know in the chat, YouTube. Mulimutie. Today we're reading a book called Museveni's Uganda, Paradoxes of a Hybrid Regime. Simanyi oba comment yange echali pinned. Comment echali pinned, mujiraba. No? Kale. Let me fix that right now. Does anyone know how I can... No, sorry, I didn't mean to do that. Does anyone know how I can pin a comment? Or kumara a banga Danny like for a whole life?
Yo, so
Hello, I added you by accident, my friend. Anyway, can you please? I'm so sorry. I am sorry I added him by accident. Kale, biganye. Biganye. Korentia. How do I... Simani. But hopefully you guys can hear me in the content wange. These are the chapters. Introduction. Chapter 1 is Museveni's Uganda in comparative context. Chapter 2, the rise and demise of a broad-based government. Chapter 3, a troubled household, dissension within the national resistance movement. Chapter 4, quid pro quo of political liberalization. Chapter 5 is participation, patronage and power in local politics. Chapter 6 is the carrot and the stick. I've heard from some good friends that chapter is good. Chapter 7 is peace and insecurity. Chapter 8 is legitimating repression and corruption. And the epilogue. Tutandikileku chapter 1. I'm going to skip the introduction and just go straight to chapter 1. I encourage encourage you um, to read it yourself so that you can read from the introduction. Chapter 1: Museveni's Uganda in Comparative Context. It starts with a quote from Miriam Matembe, the former member of Uganda's parliament in the Pan-African Parliament 2004. The NRM fought to bring democracy, but now it's fighting democracy. The major political question today is democracy. Although much of the attention in the literature of African politics after 1990 has focused on the issue of democratization, the most important development of this period is at the other end of the spectrum: the slow but ongoing political liberalization of authoritarian regimes and their emergence as hybrids. Hybrid regimes, both in their semi-democratic and semi-authoritarian variants. That means there are two different types of hybrid regimes. The hybrid regimes where it's almost democratic, but they don't respect democratic principles. And then there's another type of hybrid regime which is almost authoritarian, but it's not all the way authoritarian, that it controls everything that of course it controls everything, but that it fully shows that it controls everything. But those are two different types of hybrid regimes. Let's continue. They are neither liberal democracies nor autocratic regimes. Rather, they are suited along a spectrum in between these two types. Rather than focus only on the countries that are clearly democratizing, as much of the literature has done, this study suggests that it is also important to look at the softening that has taken place within authoritarian regimes, generating movements from authoritarianism to semi-authoritarianism, and from semi-authoritarianism to semi-democratic regimes. So the transition has come from straight up authoritarian to down to semi-authoritarian, and then from semi-authoritarian to semi-democratic. Now, what comes after that is ideally democratic, which happens when the people stand up for their rights and decide that, okay, we don't want to, a semi-authoritarian or a semi-democratic government is not enough for us. So, that's when the awakening starts, when the people realize that there is more than a government that's repressing their rights and telling them that there's nothing more than a semi-authoritarian or a semi-democratic state. Now, I believe these challenges within authoritarian and semi-authoritarian regimes, I believe, are among the most profound changes that have occurred in Africa since 1990. Hybrids are a challenge to the notion of the linear and teleological march of democratization from opening to breakthrough and finally consolidation. Corothas regards political party development, the strengthening of civil society, judicial reform, and media development as chaotic processes of change that go backwards and sideways as much as forward and do not do so in a regular manner. So Corothas, I'm not sure who Corothas is or what organization Corothas is, but it seems like a credible source of information. They regard political party development as the strengthening of civil society, like it, the development of a political party starts when they start to develop the social society from underneath. And it also means to reform the judiciary and to develop the media. So when the civil society has its rights, and when the judiciary is free to make its decisions, and when the media and press is free to share the news factually and truthfully, that's when political party development happens. Given that most regimes in Africa today fall into this category of hybrids, it is my contention that we need to take a more serious look at them in their own right, rather than simply as countries that did not make it into the democratic fold. Moreover, it matters to people who live under these regimes. Certainly, one cares if one has an Idi Amin in power. Well, you can't ignore it. Do we get an interactive Q&A? After I'm done with reading, at least let me see how long chapter 1 is. It shouldn't be too long. It's pretty long, but maybe after 5 pages, because this book has a bunch of graphs and tables with information. So maybe in one of those gaps. The limitations of social science as it has developed make embracing two contradictory realities at the same time nearly impossible. Yet that is what hybrid regimes require of us. A hybrid regime, which is what Museveni has put us under, forces us to accept two opposites of things that, okay, this is happening, but this is also happening. That we're suffering in that the police can control institutions and tell institutions what to do, but then they're also telling us that, oh, in Uganda we're free, in Uganda you can do whatever you want. But then if doing whatever you want pisses off the government or is not in accord with what the government wants you to do, then that's a wrong thing. That's what they call a hybrid regime, where you don't know what is right or wrong. They're not telling you that it's a fully authoritarian state, but they're also telling you that it's free. So you're just confused. You're just there. To the whole world, it seems like there's freedom in the country, but everyone in the country knows that there's actually no freedom. So let's continue. They embody two different divergent impulses, both which reflect a certain reality depending on what processes or actors one is analyzing. To say, as some do, that hybrids are only a facade of authoritarianism is not completely accurate, since there are times when rights are guaranteed and protected. On the other hand, to see such regimes as democratic belies the capriciousness. On the other hand, to see such regimes as democratic belies the capriciousness with which those same rights can be withdrawn and the undemocratic ends to which democratic institutions have been used. Let's first internalize this sentence, because I also need to understand it. On the other hand, to see such regimes as democratic belies the capriciousness with which those same rights can be withdrawn and the undemocratic ends to which democratic institutions have been used. Okay, so I think this statement means that if we try to see these institutions as democratic, or to see the regime and consider it democratic, is kind of disrespectful to the meaning of democracy. You know what I mean? It's like if the regime says that it's democratic, but the institutions that are under it are being used for undemocratic things, evidently, then it's really contradictory to the meaning of democracy, and being called a democratic state really doesn't make sense. You can't call this regime democratic if the things that it does are not democratic. Sometimes it's democratic, sometimes it's not. Better stated as a hybrid regime. Hybrids also matter if one is concerned, as Thomas Coronthas, Robert Bates, Pierre Englebert, and others about state building. State building is often pitted against political liberalization, according to the view that the former should take precedence over the latter. Democratization cannot occur without a state in the first instance. States can exist with or without democratization. Moreover, states can be and have been built on authoritarian foundations. That's true, but how happy are the people in those states? A state can exist the same way North Korea exists, but what's the point of the state? Actually, this is one thing that has been on my mind a lot. I don't know why Museveni just doesn't say outright that okay, Uganda is an authoritarian country, because there's authoritarian countries out there, but having this facade of democracy, and then when people come out to speak against you, you abduct them and then do all these heinous things to them. You know, the other day, two of our Kenyan brothers were released from detention, and Museveni himself told us that these guys had been put in a fridge, which is extremely unhumane. If this was any other president in almost any other part of the world that really receives attention, this would be called out, but it's very suspicious that no Western country is calling this out. It's very, very sad stuff that we have to deal with this in the 21st century. It will come to an end. So, let's continue. This study shows the necessity of both state building and political liberalization for moving these hybrid regimes out of the limbo that they are. Ultimately, state building cannot progress without a secure foundation of state legitimacy, especially when state building is combined with extreme poverty. For example, some two guys argue that state legitimacy is crucial for state building, and that the most important feature of democratization that creates state legitimacy is the rule of law. Now, that's tricky, because in Uganda, the law doesn't really work unless a ruling party wants it to work. They argue that the state building and democratization therefore need to go hand in hand. So to build the state and to give power to the people, and to give power to the institutions, and to give power to the judiciary, and to give power to the media, we have to fully democratize or to fully give rights to these people through the rule of law. And that makes sense. I don't know, what do you guys think? Do you guys think that a state can fully democratize if the rule of law doesn't work? Do you guys think that a state can fully function with within the rights of its people without giving powers to the judiciary, giving power to institutions, and giving power to the police and all these law keeping institutions to actually work on the law? What do you guys think? Actually, let me see who I can add. Brenda Warwick, Manrick. Nanti ekitabo kiri mu luzungu, so mba nina okwogera oluzungu, bansonyiwe. Ekitabo kyennyini kiri mu luzungu, so I have no idea what I'm talking about. So what I'm saying is coming from this book that has been researched by many scholars that I think know what they're talking about. What I'm saying is not coming from my own brain. I'm just stating facts that have been fact-checked by many different scholars. Kale kanziremu. It seems that alright. Kadem. They argue that state building and democratization therefore need to go hand in hand. There cannot be democratization without a state. But by the same token, state building cannot easily take place in today's world without legitimacy. And the best way to secure legitimacy is through an emphasis on the rule of law, which is a central feature of democratization. Political liberalization helps keep in check some of the worst abuses of power and corruption, and thus has itself become a very necessary ingredient for state building. The Ugandan case shows how the excess of authoritarianism, patronage, and violence of the regimes of Amin and Obote ultimately led to state collapse and institutional decay. We saw when Amin and Obote were still in power, the extent they went in their authoritarianism, which I personally think lowered our standards as Ugandans for the type of leaders that we can endure, and that's why Museveni has been in power for 40 years. We have low standards. We haven't had very amazing leaders in the past, but that shouldn't stop us from knowing our rights and understanding that we shouldn't settle for the bare minimum. Where was I? Bansonyiwe. It was political liberalization, even in its limited form under Museveni, that initially offered a respite from a downward spiral at least until 1985. The experiences under Amin and Obote regimes provide cautionary tales of what happens to state building when political liberalization is reversed in a poor country and when there are no checks on executive power. There are still no checks, but had Museveni shown his true colors in the start, he really wouldn't have stayed very long because his people would have turned on him there and then. Having said that, I must add that there are real structural impediments that make democratization much less likely in Africa. than other parts of the world today. They have to do with lack of economic growth. Tetulina sente mu Africa, so kigenda kubeera kizibu nnyo 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 bwe tutalonda. If we don't vote, it's going to be really really hard okujja abantu wansi mu grassroots okubagamba nti kale okubajja mu eyo mindset. That's why they tell you that Muganda or Mugambe that bagambe ebiri mu kubeerawo in the real world. You have someone is screaming in the background. Crazy people around this area. Anyways, if we don't sensitize the people in Uganda, the message doesn't go anywhere. Kubanga abantu bali so worried about sente zaabwe. Abantu tebalina sente. Museveni has made sure that the people stay poor so that they don't worry about the political situation in Uganda. Tebabirowoozako. Before the people power movement, I'm telling you for sure abantu bali tebalowooza ku politics wadde n'akamu. The ones that love it, the ones that hate it, even you that are commenting in my live and telling me to stop talking and do this and that, mwali temulowooza ku politics wadde n'akamu. No one was thinking about politics before the people power movement came, at least on the scale that they're thinking about it on right now. So I think that the people in charge of the people power movement are doing a really good job in sensitizing the youth and sensitizing the people of the country to know what's going on. Yeah, let me repeat that line. It was political liberalization, even in its limited form under Museveni, that initially offered a respite from a downward spiral until at least 1985. The experiences under the Amin and Obote regimes provide cautionary tales of what happens to state building when political liberalization is reversed in a poor country and when there are no checks on executive power. Having said that, I must add that there are real structural impediments that make democratization much less likely in Africa than other parts of the world today. They have to do with lack of economic growth. Even a country like Uganda, which has fared better than most in terms of economic development, remains a long way from reaching the levels of growth that would qualitatively improve its chances of democratizing and remaining democratic without reverting to authoritarianism or semi-authoritarianism. So, if we don't fix the financial situation of the people in Uganda, if we don't get back on track, tugenda okulaba ekintu kyebayita suffering on the highest order. Right now, Ugandans are suffering, yes, but not to the point that people will pour themselves on the streets right now. Maybe during the elections, during the protest vote. Right now, kwene sawa. People are pacified enough. Thank you for that. People are pacified enough that it's not something that's on their minds 24/7, and I think that's the direction that we're heading. Binyiza. Yes. This chapter provides an overview of the changes that have occurred in Africa ever since the early 1990s. Now that we have had more than 2 decades to observe the impact of political liberalization on the continent. It starts with a discussion on the ways in which various regime types are delineated. I don't know what that means. Let me define that. to describe or portray something precisely. Sorry. Particularly the hybrid regimes. There's no exact way to describe the way Museveni rules Uganda apart from hybrid regime. Museveni akozesa ekintu kye bayita hybrid regime tali exactly nga Kim Jong-un wa North Korea, tali exactly nga I don't want to name names naye he's not exactly the most democratic leader. Tosobola kugamba nti Museveni, having ruled for 40 years, that ali democratic oba ali pro rule of law or anti-authoritarian. Kubango Chidaba, he's an authoritarian man. That's how he rules. So we're going to discuss overall political liberalization and how it trends in Africa ever since 1990, and how it contrasts in the trajectories of authoritarian, democratic, and hybrid African political systems. And the book says it concludes by examining the key themes and characteristics of semi-authoritarian regime types in Africa as well as the ways in which these features have played out in Uganda ever since 1968. In particular, it focuses on the paradoxes of power as they relate to patronage and violence. Museveni bwakozesa sente ne violence, and also power sharing with respect to ethnicity, clan, and religion, and the challenges of political liberalization, the societal efforts to protect civil and political rights, security, economic influences on democratization, and the ambiguous role played by donors in Uganda. Yep. Let's talk, guys. Do you guys think Uganda has democracy? I want to talk to someone and see what you guys think that the type of leadership that we're getting in Uganda. Jebaleko 7 nsanyusa okuku adinga ku live ya Jendi 7. So nange nsanyusa okubeerako naawe ku live yange. So olowooza ki ku political situation in Uganda leero? Oliwa. Actually, NEP akava mu Ankole region and ebintu byeyalabye, it's actually alarming. Abannayuganda basinga balowooza abantu ba Ankole bali bulungi, naye when you see from the conditions ze babeeramu, it's actually very sad. Yeah. Tewali mirimu. It's alright. Yeah, tewali mirimu. Me personally, najja kusoma. If Makerere was set up ku level genders anti, you know, I'm not going to say Makerere si university nungi, but it's not as good as it could have been, you know. Waliwo ekintu president waffe kye yagamba the other day, President Kyagulanyi Museveni yagamba nti just 10% ku sente ze bakozesa mu state house buli lunaku, if we took off that money, zisobola okusasula every student's tuition e Makerere omwaka mulamba. It's alarming. Nanziza nnyo okujja ku live yange Sebo. Thank you for sharing your insight. Thank you. Alright. So Kendabe, who else I can have on here? Ekitabo kyembadde nsoma, I think njagala nkisome internalising it. Bwe mmala okisoma, then ngenda komawo ku live with insights ku highlighted areas bwe mmala okusoma kyentera okukola, and it's really confusing bwe mba nsoma out loud, so I prefer internalizing it and looking at it and just understanding everything and highlighting, then bwe mmala ngenda komawo mba highlighting ire mbagambe ebintu ebiri mu kitabo kino, mba exposing ire ebintu ebibeerawo mu nsi yaffe, and bwe tuvaawo then tujja labiraawo. Let me see who else I can have on here. Seven. Hello.
It is a pleasure.
It's my pleasure, Seven. It's my pleasure to talk to you. No worries.
To be on such a platform.
No problem. It's my pleasure to have you on my platform.
Yes, for sure, in accordance to the topic. To my own thinking, surely we do not have democracy in accordance to the writer of the book. Because when you look at him, he's trying to say that society must be doing wonderfully economically for us to be having democracy. There must be liberation in form of freedom, of which we do not have in Uganda. You see, the judiciary is actually not doing in accordance to what is right, but because of authoritarianism.
Yeah.
When you look at how the judiciary makes laws, you realize that there is somebody backing them up and giving them rules to implement policies.
Exactly.
So to my own thinking,
summed it up really well. When the institutions aren't working, when the judiciary is being sidelined and being puppet controlled by an authoritarian state, when the media isn't allowed to speak up on behalf of the people, as I've seen in Uganda, NTV the other week was not allowed to go into parliament, and they released a bunch of statements and all that stuff. And now we've been seeing how the posts have been going. It's crazy. It's crazy that that something like that can happen in a country that claims to be democratic. Nesebo, Gwenga Boli, do you speak Luganda?
Yeah,
Ka-
ndogera Oluganda.
Kale, Gwenga Boli ng'omuntu
Yes.
oli otya mu nsi yo, ojagala of course kale ng'omunauganda ojagala. I think simanyi weeyagala mu nsi yo.
Yes, njagala nnyo Uganda yange, and of course I'm proud to be Ugandan.
Mm.
Naye ate kati nze nga nze ndi student. I'm a student at Kyambogo University year 3.
Mm.
However, very worried. Kwegamba I'm uncertain, si sure nti oba naafuna ne ku mulimu after pursuing this degree.
Yeah.
Because literally I'm a science teacher. So because of that, being not sure whether I'm going to secure this job, for sure I don't feel safe in my own country.
Mm.
It is very uncertain. Economically, I'm not doing all that good. You know, we struggle a lot to get the tuition. We struggle a lot when you look at the policies that are in here at the university, the guild presidents that you vote for.
What
and
kind
they
of
are work
policies?
for this.
I'm sorry to interrupt.
Bafuba okulaba nti bafightinga anybody that is in line with helping the students.
Yeah.
So kati nze nga nze ayogera on behalf of the students. I don't think we are doing best in our own country. For sure, it is not the case.
That's very frustrating. And
Yes.
ideally, in a new Uganda, that's something that shouldn't exist.
Yes,
We hope that the people's eyes will open, and this coming election, we will protest our vote and protect our vote and keep trying to progress democratic principles. Thank you so much for coming onto my live. Let me and I hope everything is good for you in the future. I'm also a student, so I feel for you on a personal level, and I know how that
It's
feels.
a pleasure.
It's a pleasure to have you on my TikTok as well.
All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Let's see. I want to pick someone that looks neutral. Sagala abantu bagambe nti I'm only picking NUP people. Nze musajja waffe ajje. Sawa mmeka e Uganda? Sawa emu, sawa bbiri, ziri sawa mmeka? Sawa emu, kale. My guest has refused to join. Let me pick this next person. Hello?
Hi, Solomon.
Hello, how are you doing?
I'm okay. How are you?
Alright. I've been hosting people here on my live. I hope you don't mind being on. We've been discussing a book called Museveni's Uganda Paradoxes of Power in a Hybrid Regime. But right now I'm just talking to people that are in my life and asking them, Nti, where Galamusi, or are you enjoying yourself within your country?
Honestly, kanjogere mu Luganda
Kale.
ekyamazima ekiriwo tunyigiriziddwa nnyo kati okolaba ffe Solomon tuvudde mu ssomero last year I was at Chambogo University tuvudde ku ssomero tetulina mirimu tuyingidde obusuubuzi tuyiriba but still tunyigiriziddwa up to the extreme nti n'obusuubuzi bwe tulimu essaawa eno babwonoonye buweddewo.
That's the goal actually. That's Museveni's goal. Okujawo obusuubuzi completely. You know about that, right?
Kati we are looking for a sector gyetugamba tugenda kulilayinako tuggyemu ekitundu tuggyemu ekyokulya but naye egaanye like tuli ku kisenge honestly speaking we are looking for change like change everywhere because n'emirimu gya kikono obimanyi Uganda emirimu gya kikono.
Yeah. Tewali mirimu wadde
kati ffe abaana abawala tukyogenda like abroad countries watebayo okutulugunyizibwa wali a lot of prostitution.
As soon as you reach they take your passport. As soon as you reach they take your passport.
If they take your passport obeeranga still ali mu busibe ate wajja kukola mwana gwe we at a point nti titunyigiriziddwa we don't have any other option.
Yeah. Well, the only thing that we can do about that is just right now what we can do peacefully is to vote out this guy and just collect ourselves, go protest our vote, protect it, make sure that they don't steal it from us, because that's what they plan to do, and they're going to kill many of us. I don't know if I'm going to be in America or if I'm going to be in Uganda during that time. But
I have to cast my vote to
vote. If I can vote, I will be there to vote.
Yeah.
But yeah, thank you so much for sharing your insight. I really appreciate it. I appreciate everyone that comes on here, and I hope you have a great day.
Thank you so much for this opportunity as well.
Thank you. Yep. And by the way, on that topic of abantu abasubula, you guys have been seeing all the flooding that's going on in town, and abantu abakola projects munda mu town, in the middle of the town, these people of harm and the likes of him, without any clearance, nebazimba ebintu by'abantu nebifa, all the shops flood, amazzi negagenda buli wamu, abantu abamu ne bafa, abaana abato ne bafa in these little floods because someone wanted to cut costs in building. So those things don't need to happen. Those things don't need to happen. People stop thinking the government will give all of you jobs. When on you create your own jobs. So let me tell you something about entrepreneurship. Entrepreneurship only happens in societies that allow it to happen. In Uganda, there are no incentives for entrepreneurship. To create your own jobs, you need money. You need money to start businesses. You need money to run those businesses. You need customers. How are you going to get customers? Ng'abantu tebalina sente. Who's going to buy your produce? Ogenda kukola otya sente? That's why you cannot really run your own business in a failed system nga nawe totandise na sente. You know what I mean? So this all takes gathering resources and gathering everyone twayagale ngaba na Uganda. Let me see who else I can have. One last person in my live yange. And then so much, but you know. Those about YouTube. Don't you think I'm done? Thank you guys for joining my live stream. Tugenda kwera bedda.